The format of this meeting is a 10-minute speaker, a 10-minute coffee break, and then a main speaker. Tonight, our first speaker is Jenna. Help me welcome Jenna to the stage.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jenna. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm terrified, but I'm determined to not have a panic attack through this whole thing, because I've done that before. And it's an unbearable, uncomfortable 10 minutes to watch. So I guess I'll start a little bit about how it was, but I don't want to focus so much on that, because that's miserable, and we all know what that's like, but just to, I guess, sort of qualify. I grew up in Wisconsin, in a suburb of Milwaukee, a family, 4 kids, and a little middle-class family, and I never really had that, feeling like I don't fit in that people talk about. I felt like I still do really like people, generally speaking, and so I felt like I kind of fit in everywhere, and I don't know, my childhood was pretty hunky-dory, and my high school years was like the glory days, and everything was good. My focus then was, I was focused in school and sports. I played soccer all my life, and I worked hard to achieve things with that, and that was kind of my focus. I had friends in high school that drank. I mean, our group of friends did, but for whatever reason, we'd never drank and drove. We had a designated driver, and I kind of always nominated myself to be that because, for one, I worked and bought myself this little Acura Integra that I thought was so cool. And so I liked to drive around to, all my friends' parties here or there, and we just didn't drink and drive. It never occurred to me then. It certainly would later, but not then. And so I was focused on that stuff, and I didn't want to get in any trouble with soccer. And so my priorities were pretty focused and normal, I guess, for my age. My first foray, I guess, into addiction was, I think I kind of got into it almost as a cry for attention with some things that were going on at the time in my life. But I didn't know my tendency for, addictive habits, and I developed anorexia probably 18, 19 years old. And that was where I kind of honed all those skills of lying and covering things up, and I was wearing workout clothes underneath normal clothes so that my roommates wouldn't know where I was going, and just all those things that I would become very good at when I would find alcohol. And so my first treatment experience was actually for eating disorder, and I went back and forth with that, which would become a pattern for sure, but somehow I was able to. I'd come home from college, and my mom stuck me on a scale and then was like, "That's it, you're going to treatment." And that would also become a pattern. My mom, even though I was a grown adult, just throwing me in treatment, and me feeling so helpless, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to do whatever I'm told to do. And eventually, I guess after a couple of rounds of in and out with that, I realized that life's passing me by, and I'm having to withdraw from this college that I worked so hard to get into, and this is just going nowhere, and so I'm just going to stop. And somehow I was able to do that, and I think the somehow was alcohol. I was at this party school, University of Wisconsin, and everybody drank, so I just kind of found my niche in that, and it very quickly, I think there was maybe a semester where it was excessive partying, but sort of on everybody else's level, and then it became all the time blackouts and just drinking all the time, and I became very resentful at my mom, who's still to this day my best friend, but I had a lot of resentment to her because she had kind of broadcast to everybody, all my roommates and friends, that Jenna can't drink anymore, she has a problem, and so everyone was always watching out for me, and so I felt like I had no choice but to hide my drinking, and so I blamed her and my twisted thinking for, making me a closet drinker when, I'm sure that was in my future either way, but so it went from excessive partying to hiding, filling water bottles with vodka to go to the library and study, and probably by 20, I was drinking all the time. I mean, in the morning, all day long. I was having alcohol withdrawal seizures. I'd become physically dependent on alcohol, and it got very scary very quick. And so all of my 20s, pretty much, at least this helps with the 10-minute speaker part, my whole 20s is just a replay of the same things over and over, but with every step kind of around the cycle, around the merry-go-round, getting a little worse and worse, and things going at a more rapid pace. I was in and out of treatment over and over. I had withdrawn from so many semesters, and I realized that, I couldn't be in school anymore because I wasn't, I wasn't surviving. And my mom had sent me to treatment in Wisconsin, and at the time, there was like one sober living in like the sticks up north that was for women and children. And I remember just being like so, like snobby about that, like so put off that like I'm not going to go live with a bunch of deadbeat mothers. I'm young and I'm just, I party a little much, so I manipulated my mom into sending me to sober living in California. And I was always able to, in all these in and out of treatments, I could say the right things and make people think that I was like serious and dedicated, but I truly, in hindsight, I don't think I was ever really, I didn't really accept the permanence of the disease. I just thought that this was like where I was at in life, and that, once a different set of circumstances occurred, or I grew up, or I found my career, or whatever it was, once I got the things and life went on as it should, that I would drink like a normal person. I didn't accept that this was like, for the rest of my life, and something I would either need to, sink or swim. And so I said all the right things. I ended up, I guess, even working at the treatment center I went through in California. I would always like build everything back up. I got a car, I worked, I saved, and then I would relapse, and it would I'd fall even lower, and then I'd get sober, and I'd build things back up, and it was just this constant, ever-growing, steeper and steeper roller coaster of miserable events. I guess at some point my mom had remarried in Florida, and she was pretty much the only person that would still have anything to do with me. Lots of failed relationships. Oh, it's worth mentioning, in California, I developed a new hobby of drinking and driving. And for me, drinking the way I drink, it wasn't just like a little tipsy and driving. I'm just so fortunate to this day that I never got in any accident or hurt anybody, because there was times I don't even remember driving. But thankfully, I always got pulled over. So I kind of got 3 DUIs like in rapid succession and did some jail time for that. And you would think that that would be a rude enough awakening. But I remember getting out of jail, and I had to do county work program, and I did that. And then it was like, well, I don't have a license anymore, so I'm not going to be drinking and driving. So I shouldn't, how much legal trouble can I get into just being of age to drink and drinking home alone, So I felt like I was clear to drink the way that I wanted to drink, without causing too much harm. And I told myself I was young and I don't have kids or, responsibilities. And I always found a way to justify this subpar way of living. And it was just heartbreaking. So I wound up in Florida, and in and out of treatments there. I've tried to count up the number of treatments and detoxes I've been in, and I honestly, I can't for the life of me recall all of them, but I think it's like 15 or 20. And sometimes I was like ready to do something about this and realizing that this is not working out. And other times it was like, I think I got to a point where I just felt really defeated, and I thought that this was like, my lot in life. Like, I would go to speaker meetings and I'd hear people speak and share, and I was so happy for you that you could get this and that you have this sober life, and I'm so, happy for you, but like I don't see that for me. I don't think that that's going to be my fate, I thought that everyone that was sober for a long period of time had some kind of magical something that, like, I just don't have that, and so I was kind of going through motions because I didn't know what else to do, but I hit that jumping off point, I guess, at some point where I just got really tired. I ended up kind of running my life into the ground in Florida. By this time, I started to, like, get the big girl things that I thought would straighten me out. I started a family, and I had a daughter, and I thought, like, now that I have a child, like, I'll be responsible, and I'll drink like mommy's drink and have my wine at night. And I would get fooled by these, like, chunks of time where I could vaguely remember, like, drinking all day and being that person, but I also would have periods where I would just drink, like, every night. And it did have to be, like, every night, but I would at least make it to 5 p.m., and I would go to work every day and show up, for responsibilities. And so I would start to think, like, maybe I've just overreacted about this whole alcohol thing, and, or maybe my mom and everybody made it out that I'm, this horrible drunk, and it's really not, I can just grow out of it. And then inevitably, 5 o'clock would come sooner and sooner, and I would eventually always end up back in that same place of just being like a slave to alcohol. Like, I would be sick and drinking. I would be unemployable and broke and drinking. I always had to it's so cliche, but I would always go to a hotel because either A, I was in sober living where I couldn't drink, or I was at home with, a boyfriend who didn't want me drinking. And so I always had to, I'd want to drink so bad that I'd have to go and spend my savings to just stay in a hotel alone all by myself and drink, because I already had developed such shame about the way that I drank that I didn't want to drink. I had no desire to drink at a bar with other people socially. I wanted that dark, lonely, shameful place. And so eventually we moved out here, and I had no idea that Prescott was such a haven of AA, but my partner's mom lived out here, so we found ourselves down here. And I just got kind of brought into this whole family here. And I still had my struggles. I still was on this 6-month sort of relapse cycle of, I would do all the things and say the right things, and I would have a sponsor, and I would sort of walk the walk, but I still never really accepted, I don't think. I like in the big book where it says something, I don't know the real, direct quote, but something about we made a lot of promises and a lot of resolutions and a lot of this, that, and the other, but we never made a decision. And I feel like that's where I was at. I never really decided that I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it completely, and I'm going to get that life that I hear other people talking about that I think is not for me. I'm just going to humor myself that maybe I could be like them, So I should tell you this one story because it's one of those God moments where, and my relationship with a higher power is kind of ever evolving, but I've had to kind of just stop trying to figure that out and pressure myself into it and just at least let myself recognize where God is. And so I could always pick my relapses. It would be these moments when my family needed me or I really needed to show up in life, and I would just crumble. And it would just be this epic, blow up relapse. And so I did one of those such things. I went to Florida to see my sister who had just had a baby and meet my nephew. And I drank on the plane, and the rest is just history. My partner had to fly to Florida to retrieve our daughter, who was with my mom, who was living in Florida, and tried to retrieve me. And I was just I can't go back to life. I'd had my dream job that I knew was gone because I was due back at work, and I wasn't there. And I just couldn't face it this time. I couldn't face the music, and I was just in total despair. And I was sitting in the hotel lobby. I don't know why I wasn't in my room, but I was just probably looked a mess. I was crying. I was just at a loss. And this guy walked up and said, "Are you Jenna?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Are you Nikki's sister?" And my sister had been sober in AA in Melbourne, Florida for, I guess, about 3 years at that time. And I said, "Yeah, I don't know you, though." And he said, "You do. We all know each other. We all know each other's heart." And he kind of explained that he, knew my sister, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And I just told him, I don't know anymore, what I'm doing. And he stopped what he was doing. He worked at this hotel that I happened to land at, and took time away and took me to a detox. And I mean, what a God shot that in some place that I don't know anybody, that I find this AA guardian angel to pluck me from. I mean, I had nowhere to go. I had no plan. I was out of options. And that was the epic relapse that kind of, I know Bill's story, I think he talks about just not, you wake up and you just don't have the will to do battle, and I was there. I didn't want to keep going back to AA and start all over and pick up the pieces and then in 6 months just be doing this again. And I was either gonna, I don't know, go on to the miserable end like it says, or draw on some kind of strength. And so for a while I really didn't have the kind of solid faith in God or a higher power that everybody who had what I wanted spoke about. But I just, everyone said just don't fight it and don't analyze it and just hear. And I know that I always had gratitude for these little things that would happen. And for gratitude, it's I had to be thankful for something. I could see that I was being gifts, and it's where are these things coming from? These are not of my own doing. And so the gratitude kind of developed into a relationship with a higher power. And I still hesitate to call it a relationship because I have a lot of work to do as far as dependence on that higher power in a daily life. But I still find I thank whatever it is, wherever it is, for everything, every day. I mean, I have a family right now who's really in the grip. A little brother who's almost died and is still struggling with his health from alcoholism. He's not even 30. And my older sister who's in jail. She relapsed after 3.5 years. And so I see the torment that this disease brings in people's lives. And, you know, the fact that any of us are like here in a room and sober and in a room full of love, when we could be in a jail, you know, a prison, in the grave, dying a slow, painful death. I mean, a million miserable things that are like written in stone that this is our fate if we keep drinking. Like, these things will happen. I mean, that's my whole history is jail institution. There was one time I was just drinking on a Tuesday night back when I was like, you know, drinking around the clock, and I came to in a hospital bed, and my mom was there sobbing, and I'd had a 0.4 alcohol level, and I mean, this was just a Tuesday night, just me drinking like I drink. But I almost died, or they thought I'd have wet brain for life. I mean, this stuff, you know, it happens. So the fact that we're here and together and sober is just such a gift, and I feel like that's a testament to something. I don't always know what that is, but I know that it's here in these meetings, and I know it's among all of you and your stories. And so a little bit about what it's like today. You know, life still happens, and some life things recently are like things that I was sure, I mean, I couldn't have like a bad night of waiting tables without thinking that was a reason to drink. So I always feared, like, what would I do if like a loved one dies? Like, of course, I'm not going to be able to like get through that sober. I just can't imagine that. And recently, just a couple weeks ago, my father was dying, and I was able to go home to Wisconsin and be with him as he was dying and be there for his wife and my little brother, and I mean, and just be there to be of service. And these are things that, like, I promise you I'm not capable of in my own way. I'm just not. I'm a panicky person. I'm not someone you draw on in crises of my own accord. But I felt like that entire trip, like something had just carried me. Like, I was very, like, eerily calm and present, and it was like, I don't know this person, you know, but I feel like something was with me, and so it's kind of reinvigorated my whole faith. And I never thought about, you know, when I got sober, I thought I was getting sober to like get the stuff and have the life, you know, I want all the things and the happiness, and I never really thought about just being able to like be present even in like those really hard times, you know, and to like walk through things with grace. I mean, I'm so thankful that I was able to do that, and it's just kind of like solidified, like I want my seat here, you know, I want to keep showing up. I don't want to like go back out and have to pick up the pieces, and like none of us have to do that. If you're new, like I always love seeing young people, because like I was a young person, believe it or not, like when I got here, and I thought I was too young, and none of the yets would happen, and I spent 10 years until I like grew into my seat here, where it was like, okay, now I guess I'm old enough to be an alcoholic, you know. But you don't have to waste a decade of life, and or worse, you know. There's just so much good in my life. I had a baby in February, so I had a second daughter, and I'm able to love her with like every God-given speck of love in me, and not, you know, filtered or distracted by alcohol. It's just like pure love, like a God-given love. And I'm able to extend that love to even people I don't like, but I can love them with a God-given love today. So if you're new, I hope you stay, because there's so much love here and so much hope, and I love all of you, and I'm thankful to be here with you guys. Thanks.